Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Pretty sure in my last video, which I think was a wrap up, I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna try and post more, and then I immediately did not. But I've been pretty busy. August was kind of a crazy month. Just traveling and busy, and I've just been in a bit of a reading slump. So, you know, or like reading like longer books. Like I had an audiobook that was like 14 hours. So I didn't finish that, even though I expected to when I started it, you know, like things like that. But yeah, despite that, I read 5 books. I think 4 out of the 5 were nonfiction and also audiobooks. I feel like audiobooks and nonfiction have really been like the things like getting me through this weird reading slump that I'm in, which hopefully when we get into like fall reading, which is really like fall and winter is like my favorite time to read, then I will get out of the reading slump. But you know, it happens. Okay, so the first book that I read was, I listened to the audiobook on Scribd, which was Bad Gays, A Homosexual History by Ben Miller and Hugh Lemmey. That was a nonfiction. I gave it, I think, like 4 stars, but my nonfiction ratings are just kind of like enjoyment based or whatever, I don't know, or like, does this feel important? So this is basically, it's a history book that kind of, each chapter focuses on like a different queer historical figure. They don't like assign labels to them because through history, like, labels were not really a thing as much. So, you know, like a lot of people in like ancient Rome were like bisexual, but like they didn't have that term. They had all these different things or whatever. But basically the focus on it is that when we talk about like the history of like queer figures, we always focus on like the heroes and the Harvey Milks and the amazing people who have done these great things for gay rights. But the kind of thesis statement of this book was basically that the like bad people are equally important, and in a lot of ways like the whole point of the book was to like deconstruct this like idea of like the white gay male like as like the heroes of the gay movement, and the gay liberation movement is like, when you think of like historical figures who are gay, you think of like, yeah, like Oscar Wilde and Harvey Milk and like people like that. And the book was kind of like, some of those people, because of their like whiteness or their male privilegedness, were actually like bad people. And like there's like Nazis in this book, and there were gay Nazis, and that doesn't mean that they didn't do genocide. And that it kind of is like saying that we need to look to kind of other queer figures through history who have done just as much but we don't talk about, and that the be all and end all of the gay rights movement isn't like marriage equality and this like perfect little gay family structure that looks just like a heterosexual family structure and all that kind of stuff. It's about, yeah, like queerness being subversive, and that sometimes people's own self-loathing for their gayness makes them do terrible things, and that is also important to talk about, and that in a future where with more acceptance there will be less bad gays. And I just thought it was really interesting. It was funny at points. It wasn't overly dry. It wasn't, some of the chapters were a little long. I would find myself like zoning out a little bit, but I enjoyed it, and I liked that you kind of like take it chapter by chapter. It was definitely, there were a lot more men, which I mean makes sense both with the kind of thesis statement of the whole thing, like deconstructing the male gay male, but like I wish there had been like a little more talk of non-white men, I guess, like, but maybe all of them were good, I don't know. but yeah, I thought it was really interesting, and I definitely recommend it. I think it's kind of an important thing to discuss at a time when we're dealing with so many things politically and rights being potentially taken away, and interesting to kind of examine just kind of the darker side of the fight to like how we got where we are. And then there's also some like really old stuff like from literally like Rome and stuff. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. And the audiobook was good. Then I listened to the audiobook of Freedom is a Constant Struggle, Ferguson, Palestine, and the Foundation of a Movement by Angela Davis. And I also thought that was very good. It is basically a collection of essays and interviews and like speeches from Angela Davis, who is like a big Angela Davis is like a really famous kind of like activist and public speaker, and this collection specifically illuminates connections between struggles against state violence and oppression throughout history and around the world. So it's a lot of like Black feminism. It talks a lot about like police violence, prison abolition, how like the struggle for kind of rights and equality around the world and against like apartheid states and all things like that. It brings in like Palestine, it brings in Ferguson, it talks about like South Africa and all that stuff. And I thought it was really, really interesting and really, it was tough. I had to like, I couldn't listen to it as fast as I often listen to audiobooks because I had to like really absorb it, but it's all like, it's like 3.5 hours or whatever. And I found it incredibly educational. She's such like a figure in the like equal rights, Black, anti-racist, feminist movement. And so I feel like she's like an important person to read stuff from if you're interested in all of that. And I felt like this was a pretty accessible entry point. There's definitely some things I didn't understand. Some, like, she would just be talking about something, and just because of like my lack of knowledge about like specific historical things, I wouldn't really know what she was like talking about. But it definitely taught me a lot, and I'm glad that I read it. I gave it like a 5. I rated it on like importance, but some of the essays were like a little repetitive because they were like speeches that she gave, and like some of the ones from like similar years, like a speech from like 2011 and a speech from like 2012 are going to cover like similar topics if the point is like racism, you know. But then I listened to the audiobook of the Tennessee Williams play Cat on a Hot Tin Roof. I gave that like 3.75. I think some of my issues with it were just with like the particular audiobook narration. I think obviously like a full cast would have been better because it is like a play. But basically it tells the story of this guy Brick and his wife Maggie and their relationship, and he's like an alcoholic, and it all takes place in like one evening. It's like his dad's birthday or something, and on this plantation in the Memphis area. And it was good. I'm glad I read it, I guess. I've never seen the movie, I've never seen the play, so I really didn't know much about it other than that it was about addiction and lightly queerness, but like it's very lightly touched on, kind of implied stuff. It's pretty dark, but I liked it. I would recommend it if you want to read a play, I guess. But I don't usually read plays. But yeah, I liked it. It makes me want to like see the movie or something, or the play, like instead of reading it. But yeah, I liked it. I felt there were a lot of like really profound or moving moments in it, even though I feel like the narration, like I struggled to fully get lost in it. And it's very short. It's like a 3-act play. It was like a 3-hour-long thing, but I thought it was really a lot of the, at the end he talks about like there's like an afterword that talks about like Tennessee Williams and the play and stuff like that, and I actually thought that was really interesting because I didn't know that much about Tennessee Williams, so I thought that was kind of a cool. I like to put things like this in like a historical context so I can kind of understand what's going on and like what was Tennessee like in the 30s or 40s or whenever this takes place. No, I think like the 40s or 50s. But yeah, I liked it. Yeah, I don't know. It's like a weird one. I'm like, I could have given it like anywhere from a 3 to a 4. So yeah, you know. Then the only physical book I read was the Incendiaries by R.O. Kwon, which I gave a 5-star. Absolutely loved it. It tells the story of two young people, Phoebe and Will, and I can't see her. And I would say like Will's more the main character, but there are like multiple POVs and you get some of Phoebe's point of view, and it kind of, it's a complicated story, but it's mostly about Phoebe joins a cult, and Will, he used to be incredibly religious. He lost his faith. This cult is like a religious, like Christian kind of cult, so he's kind of like, what are you doing, girl? And like it's about their relationship and his faith and her, like she doesn't even really believe, but she wants to believe, and like there's a lot about grief, and like she lost her mom and he lost God and like stuff like that, and it's really, really interesting. What I really loved about it was just the writing. I'm such like a writing vibes kind of girl. Like if the writing is beautiful and poetic, which it absolutely was, then I'm probably gonna love it. The plot was good. Like it was interesting. It went in a direction that I did not expect. Like it got like serious, like the cult stuff like went hard, and which I didn't really expect. I just thought it was gonna be like, oh yeah, like now he's gonna like save her from the cult. Like it's not really the thing. There's some like really dark like stuff that like there's like sexual assault and like death and suicide and like all sorts of things like that. But as like a character study and as a study of faith and like what and cults and kind of just how wanting to believe and wanting to have something to believe in can make people make really bad choices, and I think we see a lot of that. It seems very relevant now with everything. I feel like there's a lot of people who will believe in anything, and yeah, but the writing was really beautiful. But like don't go in like expecting like a plot. I would definitely recommend it if you'd like other kind of no vibes, just beautiful writing. Like not even, I wouldn't even say like in a Sally Rooney kind of way, because that's very much about like the characters and their relationships, but more in kind of like a Emily St. John Mandel or books like that, like Our Wives Under the Sea, which is also about grief, you know, like that kind of thing. So yeah, I really, really loved it. 5 stars. I can't believe I've never heard anyone talk about it, because like it's so good, and I can't wait to see what else she does as an author. Like I will be reading more from her, like 100%. It came out in 2018, so I guess that's probably why I haven't heard anybody talk about it. Maybe people talking about it in 2018. I don't know, I'm late. And then the last book that I finished was the audiobook From the Basement, A History of Emo Music and How It Changed Society by Taylor Markarian. I gave that a 3, I think, 3.5, being generous. It's basically, it's a look at the history of emo and indie music, like in the 2000s, but I felt it was kind of short. I felt like it was very much like an intro to emo for like maybe people who like didn't know much about it. Like, and it was very, which obviously anybody writing a book is going to be like very tailored to like their experiences. It was just not exactly my experience with emo. I felt like it was a lot of like screamo, which like wasn't really my thing. It was weird to me that she talked about like Brand New and Jessie Lacey like so much and so positively, like as a woman post everything we now know about that man. But I think for what it was and for like an intro to it, and it was always nice to have like a woman's perspective, even though I felt, again, like she talked about this scene as if it was this like amazing safe space, ignoring how incredibly misogynistic a lot of the lyrics were and a lot of the people in these bands were. I'm like, it's great that like in your community you felt safe at a show, but a lot of these men like hated women. So, and many other people have stories about not feeling safe. But I think about like the impact of emo and the emo explosion of the mid-2000s. It was interesting and I had fun with it. It was a shorter audiobook. Yeah, there was like all of a sudden out of nowhere like graphic discussions of like suicide, so like trigger warning for that. But it's just like an important part of the scene to discuss, but I didn't expect it. But yeah, I enjoyed it. I'm listening to another audiobook. I'll actually talk about that now. I'm like in the middle of like 3 books. I'm listening to another audiobook about the similar topic right now called Where Are Your Boys Tonight? The Oral History of Emo's Mainstream Explosion, which is kind of about the like 2nd or 3rd wave of emo from 1999 to 2008, which is like my experience of emo. He has interviews with everyone I loved, so it's a lot of focus on like My Chem, Fall Out Boy, Paramore, Panic at the Disco, Cobra Starship, like a lot of talking to like Gabe Sporta, a lot of really interesting stuff about like the basement show culture and all that kind of stuff and the beginnings of it, and it like goes into some of the history, but then like really focuses on like the explosion in the different areas of the country in kind of the turn of the millennium, which I found really, really interesting. I've been really enjoying the interviews with Chris Carrabba from Dashboard Confessional. And yeah, he's got freaking Pete Wentz in there, you know, which obviously is like cool. And I don't like, with the other book, I'm not expecting this girl to like be able to get in touch with like Pete Wentz for interviews or whatever, but it's just like she didn't like literally didn't mention Fall Out Boy once, and I was like, how do you talk not only about emo at all, but like emo's explosion in the mid-2000s without talking about Fall Out Boy, as if like Fall Out Boy and My Chemical Romance were like the 2 most popular. But whatever. That's just my experience. I'm like, I want my experience to be universal, but you know, she wrote the book expecting the same thing, and I like this other book because I'm like, well, that was my experience. But someone who that wasn't their experience, someone who's like a first wave freaking like Sunny Day Real Estate Rites of Spring fan is like, this is bullshit. And someone who's like younger and didn't get into emo until like now is gonna be like, that's not the bands that I like. So, you know, everyone's experience is different. But and then I'm also in the middle of Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. I just read that chapter on Law and Order SVU and I hated it, so that has put me in a bit of a slump. But again, like slump on slump on slump. But I like her writing in general, so I really want to like get back into it because I did really enjoy the other stories. I just like hated that one, and I was looking forward to it, which is annoying. And then on Libby, I'm currently listening to the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires by Grady Hendrix. I'm about halfway through, and it's my first Grady Hendrix, and I'm not really like a horror girl, but I felt like this would be like a good like fall transition kind of book, and I'm really enjoying it. So I will have updates on all of those things at the end of September, and hopefully there will also be other videos between now and then. I have some other things planned, like an autumn TBR and stuff like that, so hopefully I will get it together. Okay. Thank you so much for watching.